Hello and welcome to Florida Basketball Hour. I am Neil Blackman, Saturday Down South. On this episode, Eric Fawcett, GatorCountry.com, will join me. You can catch Fawcett's work at other spots, including Basket Under Review, which is the Trilly Donovan site, and Slap Glass, a lot of cool places where Fawcett's work appears. Make sure to check that out. And, of course, if you're a Florida basketball fan, you know you can check out his work at patreon.com/Florida BB Hour. That's where most of our work is at. Anyway, I've been through the spiel on previous podcasts. You guys know that if you want to support the pod, the absolute best way to support Florida Basketball Hour is by subscribing to the Patreon at one of the three membership tiers, the Game Day Gator tiers, your previews and your recaps, listener episodes. Your six-man club tier is going to get you everything. Your Rowdy Reptile tier is going to get you most of that stuff. That's where you want to be. Patreon.com/Florida Basketball Hour /Florida BB Hour if you're a fan. Patreon.com/Florida BB Hour. Subscription is the best way to support Florida Basketball Hour. On this episode, we're going to talk UConn, Florida UConn. The Jimmy V Classic, a fantastic game. I was up at the Garden for that. The Gators fall 77-73, a very good game. Obviously, the two-possession final score, but really a one-possession game. And then the kind of quick trigger 5-second there for Florida at the end. And then Boogie Flan has to commit the foul. They make one more free throw. And then the Xavion Lee three-pointer at the buzzer goes in and out. Otherwise, it was almost kind of a mirror image of last year's NCAA tournament second round game where the Liam McNeely three actually went in at the end. So Florida, instead of winning by 5, wins by 2. But a fantastic basketball game, a high-level college basketball game. Where you get Fawcett's take on it. You know, we haven't had a chance to even catch up on that game, much less break it down together. So that'll be fun. Also going to make sure we get into the Orange Bowl Classic. That was Saturday's game down in Sunrise at the home of the Stanley Cup champion, back-to-back Stanley Cup champion, Florida Panthers. And Florida won 80-70 in that game. Florida played about 10 to 11 minutes of the best basketball they've played all season, really, in that game. That beginning of the second half. And it started this trend where Florida has really rallied and made huge adjustments in second halves. Didn't start the trend, continued the trend. I think I said started, sorry. And, it'd be nice if the Gators would come out of the locker room to start games and pounce on people. And you do worry about that in conference play, right? Especially on the road, where if you get behind, even though you proved you could negate a 15-point deficit at Duke, you don't want to constantly be falling behind, or you don't want to constantly be playing middling basketball in the first half. And I think it's at this point a trend for Florida. It's not something I've asked Todd Golden about yet, but I'm going to, just because, with the exception of the really hot start against Arizona, I guess they were pretty good against Providence in the first half. But again, I think Providence is terrible. So I'm not going to be too nice about that. They just haven't played well in the first half this season. It's just, they haven't. Even in the Miami game, their better half, their more complete half of basketball was the second half. So what does Florida need to do to kind of start faster? These are questions that we can talk about a little bit on the podcast. But as I bring in Eric Fawcett, I think a lot of you that are tuning in want to hear more of our thoughts on UConn. And, it was a fantastic college basketball game. I mean, that's how Danny Hurley described it after. That is how Todd Golden described it after. I thought Florida defended really well for, I want to say 25 to 30 minutes of the game. I thought they did not defend well in the second portion of the first half. And because of that, and look, if you don't defend UConn well because of all the stuff they run, Eric, like they're hard to guard anyway. But then like Malachi Smith is such a heady player. He's going to pick you apart when you make mistakes. And like Florida got eaten up. And then the second half, Solo Ball made a couple really tough shots. Braylon Mullins made a couple really tough shots on possessions that I thought were pretty good defensively. In fairness, Fawcett has probably synergied or at least watched the game on TV. I saw it live. So, like, that's my only take. And it just seemed like Florida's defensive possessions were pretty good throughout the second half of that game. But, the Gators have got to, like, this isn't a mystery. Like, the numbers kind of are what they are right now.
Yeah, the thing with UConn is when you look at what Florida has been successful at, to the extent they've been successful, they've obviously been a defensive team. The offense we know has been a struggle. The defense has been really solid. And when you look at UConn, a team that has been known for their offense over the last 3 years, not as much for their defense, they've kind of rebranded. Don't know if that was the intent, but whatever the case may be, this year they are quite good offensively, but really good defensively. And that's just a situation where we saw two teams that were really making it difficult for the other when it came to scoring. But ultimately, even though I wouldn't say UConn is the great offense they have kind of once been, or have not even once been, have been multiple times, but a couple of years ago, it was definitely a situation where when kind of push came to shove, you definitely still saw that UConn is a better offensive team than the Gators. When things kind of slowed down, it was a half-court game that still benefited UConn more. Like you mentioned, they had a few more shot makers. They had more guys that are comfortable getting downhill and making plays in the paint. Like you said, with Malachi Smith finishing with 9 assists. I forget what it technically was. I think I saw like 10 on ESPN. Then it was like 9 on the NCAA stat page. But whatever the case may be, Malachi Smith had a lot of assists and just made really good decisions on every drive. And you saw that with multiple players. So I thought that was kind of just the takeaway from that one. And it's like Florida ran into a team that plays a slightly similar style, but at the same time is much, much more comfortable running stuff. And that was also the first time when you were talking about how there was moments that Florida didn't defend very well. I did think that was one of the first times that this season that Florida's really big lineup hurt them on defense. And that's one thing where it's been a strength in a lot of ways to just put out that much length and have so much rim protection and making things so difficult to work around Florida's length. But it was also a situation where like UConn puts you in situations where they've got Alex Caravan at the 4 coming off a bunch of pin downs and flares, and that's Alex Condon chasing those around. And Hauk, who is still pretty good for someone who's 6'9" at getting around screens. I mean, it's still difficult for him to chase around the like 6'4" solo balls or like the 6'6" Jalen Stewarts or like those guys who are getting he was kind of matched up with, and if Florida had to switch, and it became a little bit more of a challenge. So not that it's and when I say that, that's one thing where so few teams do that and play that way that it's not something I'm awfully concerned about when it comes to kind of Florida's really big lineup. But that was one instance where I did think that it didn't work, didn't work super well. Whereas kind of the net results of Florida playing really big have been great on the defensive end. But yeah, if you're going to start running guys who are not used to chasing guys around screens like Florida, you're going to run them off so much stuff like UConn. Ultimately, there was some really good moments for UConn's offense doing that. And it's just kind of as we look at the bigger kind of element after 10 games, and we hosted a Patreon only Zoom before the UConn game. And kind of going in, I was mentioning that these are the kind of games that you look at and you say, okay, well, like, is this going to be a Florida team that could get big wins, or is this going to look like Florida 3 seasons ago or in 2023, 24, where they wouldn't take bad losses, but they really struggled to beat good teams? And I think for them, to be really competitive in all their losses this year. There's something to be said about that. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, the reason you're in these tight games, but you don't win is because you don't execute well enough in the half court settings, whether that's defending some of these actions out of timeout scenarios, or of course the offensive side, where we know that Florida is not playing a winning style of basketball, particularly offensively, particularly when it comes to a slow half court game where they can't use their athleticism and transition ability.
Yeah, I mean, Florida's got one, two. I'm just trying to make sure I get the count right. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4 shooters averaging 5 3-point attempts a game per 40 minutes, right? I should say per 40 minutes, not per game. But, and of those guys, so that level of attempt, just so you know, like, is at the lowest to 76th percentile. So that's high volume shooters from the perimeter per 40 minutes. And only 2 of those guys, Tommy Houck and Urban Klabsar, are shooting over 33%. We know who the other 2 are, right? Lee and Boogie Fland. And Boogie's at 21.7 right now. Xavion's at 23.6. It's going up. Going up. But you know, that's kind of thing. Like, when you look at, and I thought that's the one thing I would say about the UConn game that was super interesting to me was, like, I thought like UConn was as advertised the way that, like, if you guys watched, those of you that subscribe, and I already pitched the Patreon before Fawcett got on, patreon.com/FloridaBBR. But if you watch the film study that Fawcett did, like, UConn is really good defensively. I think they're excellent. Like, and I thought, like, they got Terrence Reed back, and honestly might have defended better at times when, like, Eric Reevy was in. Certainly when Jaden Ross is out there, and that guy is tenacious defensively. They don't need him to score for him to be impactful. Silas Demery did not play well against Florida. I thought the Gators did a great job frustrating him offensively, but he can guard you. He gets up in on you. He makes it hard for you to initiate actions, which is not something that you think of much when you think of a UConn defense. They're really good in their shell. They don't miss rotations. They're quiet defensively, with the exception of a couple guys who, like Braylon Mullins, like, they got to get him to stay on the floor somehow. Like, he fouls every time he plays defense. And Danny Hurley, I think, joked about it in the postgame. He's like, I think he picked up 2 fouls in 15 seconds. And he's like, and Hurley said, he's lucky they didn't call him for 3. So, you know, but the point is, they're really good defensively. And I thought Florida's shot selection was excellent. Like, they only took 15 threes. They made a concentrated effort to get the ball inside. They passed the ball quite well. They had 14 assists, which was more than UConn had. For most of the game, and then UConn got a bunch of assists in, like, their run in the late second half and ended with 18. But my point is, like, you know, like, Florida, that was a game where Florida's shot selection was really good to me. And then you have a game like Saturday in the Orange Bowl Classic, where I thought in the first half, like, I had no idea why Florida was shooting some of the threes they were taking. I get that they were open, but we have now reached a point where Florida's an open 3-point shot is still I'm never going to call it a bad shot. That's a stupid take. But what I will say is that if there are certain guys that aren't making them at a higher level, there might be a better shot, right? And based on how Florida, I think, was 10 of 12 on rim twos in the second half against GW, like, and they're bigger, and I didn't think Houck was hurting their spacing too much in that game. Like, I think Florida just didn't attack. And, you know, like, there's no circumstance where Ruben Chenyalu needs to shoot a 3 because he's open. Like, that's just dumb, right? So shot selection becomes even more important. And all these things I bring up just to say, like, to Eric's point, the margins for Florida are so much smaller right now. And that's really what it is, right? A bad shot here, a bad shot there. a missed open three here, a missed open three there. Xavion Lee airballing a three in a one possession game with UConn with 3 minutes to go and 10 seconds left on the shot clock still. I get it. That's getting late, but you don't need the step back airball. Just that the margins are not big. And thus far in their games against the best teams they've played, 3 of the top 7 teams in KenPom, 3 of the top 6 in Torvik, they haven't quite been good enough.
Yeah, and that's obviously the struggle. I know that there's been all kinds of talk and speculation and theorizing and discussion of what you do with Xavier Lee, who did just have his best game against George Washington. But Florida brought in this guy who took bad shots and hit them at a decent rate. Like, that's what he did. He doesn't do the simple stuff at a high level. In fact, he does the simple stuff at a below average level. So when you look at him trying to get kind of back on track, like that's the challenge. You bring in a guy like that and he's struggling and he's got to play his way out of it, or you need him to play your way out of it. Like, what else do you do? That's what he did at Princeton. That's the only style of basketball he's had where he's put up numbers and been efficient, was him taking those step back looks at Princeton and hitting 41% of them. And that's kind of the big problem. And that's with that style, that archetype of player. That's why we've seen it go, it can go really well, like a Walter Clayton, or it can go pretty poorly, which has happened for a lot of guards. And that's like when you play a tough shot taking, making style, like that's when it goes bad, it goes really bad, as we've kind of seen in some games. And that's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, you can't, like, that is what Xavier Lee's been his entire career. That's what Florida paid him a whole bunch of money to do. So it's like he takes that shot against UConn, and it's like, well, that's what Florida saw on the shelf and went and purchased. So, I that's going to be something that also is interesting. And this would be the interesting question for like a Todd Golden, who obviously wants his guys to play free and loose. Well, how do you balance that with wanting to value shot selection? Because it's really hard to say, hey, we want guys to be, play freely, play loosely, feel like they have the freedom to go and put one up, including a Ruben Chinyelu, who was completely unguarded. So he took his first 3 of his career, I believe. How do you weigh that with, like you said, Neil, like, man, the margins offensively are so narrow, where a team like last year could go and have anyone go and launch a 3, or of course, last season, the kind of one of the jokes was Ruben Chinyelu, who just got his like 2 sweeping hooks from 12 feet away every game that usually didn't fall, but like, hey, he was putting in work everywhere else. So you give him those opportunities. Luckily now he's finishing at a much higher level on the block, which has been, again, one of the really good stories of Chinyelu. But you could just absorb those things, because then Walter Clayton is bombing away and hitting a million threes, and it covers up. And at no point last year did we say, wow, the margins are real thin for Florida's offense, because the margins were massive. This year, that is just not the case. We've seen it against a number of opponents. And I do think that's one of the ways that things need to change a little bit. And then Fland, who I have been higher on this year than I think most people. I don't think that he has been great. That is for sure. I think that he also hasn't been as good as I thought on the defensive end. I was someone who did say that I thought he would be outstanding on the defensive end. I do not think he has been outstanding on the defensive end. That is for sure. But I do think he's been quite good on the defensive end and been a huge part of a defense that has been really good as a whole in Florida. But yeah, he's another guy that, coming off ball screens, like the amount of off the dribble jumpers that he's settled for early in the clock. Not as much in big moments yet. In fact, he actually did hit some in big moments, at least at one point this season. But like, that's another guy that I do think there needs to be a little bit of conversation about, like, what is a good shot for you and what's a good shot for the team. And this is not even like, hey, if Flan wants to go to the NBA, like, let's make sure he's taking shots he can make, because this is not great stuff he's putting on film offensively. It's also not great stuff for the team. And that's another guy that I think might have to be reeled in. And as we look towards Florida's whatever we want to call this little stretch here, closing out with St. Francis, Colgate, and Dartmouth, these are the things that you probably hope that Florida starts to work on a little bit and starts to hone in before they start SEC play.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is true. Like they built a roster to Eric's point. Like, they knew what they got in Xavier Lee. They also built a roster that they figured would crush people on the glass and then kind of rely on two super high usage guards that would create shots. And if they missed, they'd get rebounds, and they're getting the rebounds. It's lazy because they're not but they analytically kind of profile like a Buzz Williams team right now. and their guards are shooting about like a Buzz Williams team's group of guards would shoot with no Wade Taylor. So I think that's kind of where they're at, and it asks an incredible amount out of Tommy Houck, who has played like an All-American, and an incredible amount of Alex Connon, who has had really nice halves. I thought the second half against UConn, he was splendid. The second half against Duke, he was really good. Do I think that he is going to shoot 10% from three all year? No, I actually think he'll make a few more. But I do think like that, it just asks so much of them that way. So, that's one thing. And the thing about Xavier, like, if you look at CBB analytics, like there's a lot of things that he's doing really, really well. I mean, he's in the 96th percentile for defensive rebounding among guards. He is in he's in the 34th percentile in on the good end. So he's a high. His turnover rate is not particularly high. It's only in the 34th percent, which you'd want to be lower. That's a little worse than his career, but you'd kind of expect that against this schedule, making the transition to the SEC. I mean, the numbers for him are not bad in a lot of areas, but he's there to create, to take tough shots and to make tough shots, and he's not making tough shots. And then Flan, like Florida doesn't really, certainly last year, they did not hunt very many mid-range twos, a little more of the Alabama model where you want to shoot threes and take rim twos. And Boogie's best shot right now is a mid-range jump shot. He hits them at a good rate, and it's a pretty shot for him. It goes in a lot. But, at what point do you decide to coach something different? So I think those sort of questions linger as Florida heads into these SPY games. And then the bigger question, which is one, and we'll get into this in more detail at patreon.com/FloridaBB Hour in the Patreon listener question episode that we're going to record right after this, and then drop probably before this. So if you're listening to this, that will already have been released. But they need an eighth person to step up and figure out and play and help, I think. Because I think a reasonable goal for this team is an SEC championship. I really do think, and every analytic predictive measure right now says they can win the SEC, and if they don't shoot 26% all year, it's pretty reasonable to think that they can. But I don't know if they're going to be able to do it with 7 players, Eric. And like, who's that eighth guy going to be? Is it going to be Zay Brown? I mean, we've seen flashes. Is it going to be Alex Lloyd? Well, he's going to need to play more. So the bye games are really big for him because he hasn't gotten opportunities, largely because of defense, mostly in practice. He hasn't gotten opportunities in these huge games. And then CJ Ingram, who I know people are super high on his athleticism, and so am I, and I'm high on everything about CJ Ingram. But I don't think he's ready to be the eighth guy on this team from what I've seen. He just cannot play team defense right now in any way, shape, or form. So he has a good couple minutes, and then he comes back in and gets lost on a pick and roll, and somebody makes a layup. It's not pretty what he's putting on film. So who's it going to be? I think that's an important question, and Florida would love to answer that before they go to Missouri January 3rd.
Yeah, well, the way that you led in makes it sound like there's a listener question that we will talk about it in at more length. So I will not give all my thoughts. I will save it for the Patreon, but it is yes, because I won't share my thoughts on that. You will have to subscribe to the Patreon, which is great time to do it. And I also believe that you can gift memberships as well. So if you're looking for a gift for the Gator fan in your life, it's something that I've got started doing. Not gifting our own Patreon, but gifting different Patreon and different content creators to whatever my like friends and family are like really into. Like my brother, who's a professional singer, find one of his favorite vocalists that does vocal lessons on Patreon. Gifted them one, gifting him one of those for Christmas. So fun gift idea. And I'll save my thoughts there, but I will just reiterate. And I wish just about the SEC and the chance that Florida has to win it. I wish I was stronger with my take that I did give. I'm not sure if I gave it on the podcast. I definitely gave it on the Patreon and in a couple of different instances, but I will say this, and at least some people will know that the receipts are there. I did mention this, but I mentioned in the offseason that I thought that I did not like how most SEC teams approached the portal, with my general thought being that so many teams went for depth as opposed to top end talent. Kentucky, I just really wish I was louder about my opinion, because oh my goodness, is that exactly what happened to Kentucky? I feel like it happened to multiple other teams. Alabama, who I think is really good, has a fraction of the NIL that everyone else in the league has, and therefore has no front court. We all think Jacoby Gillespie is incredible. Probably a lot of people would hope that wish he was in orange blue right now. And Tennessee just uses him as if he was Chaz Lanier, or Dalton Connect. They have one play and they run it for whoever. Doesn't matter if they're 6'8", 5'11", 6'1", what their skill set is. So I think he's awesome, but so it is crazy that it does appear that Florida is not as good as we thought as they would be going into the year. We don't want to call whatever they are now. It's also wow, this team has done really poorly. And I don't, obviously there's preseason baked in, but Florida's still 13th in KenPom. That's a pretty good place to be, while still not playing great through 10 games. But Florida's not playing great, but the other teams at the top of the SEC are not playing great either, I don't think. And I think that you look at the teams at the top right now, at least in terms of what you might project. I do think Alabama is outstanding. I also think that Alabama does not have much of a front court. I think Tennessee's roster is really good. I don't think that they use those guys right. I think Kentucky is deep, but I don't think they built their roster well at all. I think Vanderbilt plays absolutely beautiful basketball. They're starting 6'7" and 230 at center, and they have no size. So it's even though Florida, these things are not going great, the best teams in the SEC right now, I still think no one, I think, overwhelms Florida or is a tough matchup for the Gators. And the Gators have a really easy schedule relative to a lot of other teams because of the aggressive, unbalanced schedule. So there is definite reason for optimism there. And obviously Florida made their way through the non-conference, picking up 4 losses, and none of them were bad. So I guess we'll see what happens to TCU, but they're moving up strong. Took a bit of a drop after losing to Notre Dame in overtime, but that's the closest thing I've. So Florida still has every opportunity to compete at the top of the SEC, win the SEC, get a good seed, and then we'll see what happens. So that is a good place to be. Versus, I know I've made the comparison to 2 years ago, where I just wonder if Florida is going to be able to beat great teams. Well, looking at a couple of years ago, Florida entered conference play on the bubble or outside of it, and that is obviously not the case for this team as much. I mean, if they had to make a bracket now, it'd be really difficult to seed the Gators, given that they have the 4 losses and don't have marquee wins. But things still look up. So that is my very long way of saying, Neil, I will not give my thoughts on who will be the 8th man, because it sounds like we're revisiting that in the Patreon episode. But your point about if the Gators need to win the SEC, one of those guys needs to step up. That is definitely true, but I still think that there's a good path to a really good SEC finish.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. And again, it's a possession here or a possession there. And by the way, a possession here or a possession there is often the difference between winning or losing. So if you go to mybookie.ag, who are proud sponsors of Florida Basketball Hour, you can bet at those margins. There is a bet back bonus for people who sign up after hearing the MyBookie promotion on our show. And once you claim the bonus, you opt in on your bet slip, and it's basically like insurance. So if your first bet doesn't win, you get your money back up to $500 with only a one-time rollover. So to do that, we're going to put a link up on the info for this pod so that you can that's on like the Spotify link, the Apple iTunes podcast link, whatever. Wherever you listen, there will be the link available. And you click on that link to go to the MyBookie sign-up page. And if you enter the code NEIL500, you'll get that deal. So check out the guys at MyBookie. As we get closer to SEC play in March Madness, maybe you'll get more. I don't know if Eric and I straight up will gamble on the show. That's not something that we've ever done, nor is it something that we're likely to do. But you'll get tips, which we've always done, like what Eric was talking about. Like there are just certain teams in the SEC that have some flaws and has opened the door for teams like Florida. Maybe even a team like Georgia seems to be getting back to kind of Mike White's Louisiana Tech roots. They're running up and down, and they can't shoot at all. They're shooting 29% from three. The game against Florida in a couple weeks could be very fascinating, but it's a great game. If you're into over-unders, for example, you might want to go to MyBookie and think about that Florida-Georgia game, the way that the Dogs are scoring and that kind of stuff. So make sure to check out MyBookie, mybookie.ag, sponsoring Florida basketball. We are appreciative of them. I did want to ask Fawcett before we go, just kind of about the Orange Bowl Classic game. And like, I know a lot of people panicked in the first half, and like my thought on it was like a lot of it had to do with shot selection. So Rafael Castro is a guy GW has that's on the it's in the second round of some mock drafts. No Ceilings has him in there. Somewhere else I saw, well, it's the Ringers in like the next group. But like a rim runner, really talented offensive player. Kind of surprised he didn't leave George Washington, honestly. And I thought Florida did a great job on him. Like Florida has done really nice work since the Arizona game on people's best player. And I mean that including Cam Boozer, who went 1 for 8 in the second half against Florida. Like, I think Florida scouts on the other guys' best players have been pretty good. And this was another example. Would I like to see Florida close better? Yeah, but some of those threes they made were ridiculous. And what I'd like to see is like Boogie Flan not foul a three-point shooter. But just kind of your thoughts on that game and whether like the first half was sort of cause for concern, what you saw.
Yeah, it's like concerning, and it isn't. It's not concerning because it's not unlike anything else Florida is done this year. It is concerning because that's what Florida's done. And I know you were talking about this as I jumped on the call, but it's like, to me, the reason that Florida is, well, not the reason they're starting poorly, but the reason that they are playing better later is because they are such a rock fight basketball team right now. I hadn't thought about it, but when you said that they profiled like a Texas A&M team under Buzz, I was like that is totally accurate. Like they are playing that exact style, and that's exactly what happened with Buzz Williams teams. Because if you don't score, how are you supposed to jump out to leads? Like if you're not good offensively, how are you supposed to jump out to, like, so it very much stands to reason. I also talked on the Patreon about some of Florida's lineup stuff. The starting lineup has not been great. Which again is like, chicken or the egg. It's been the same starting lineup all games or all season. Right. So it's like you can't but whatever it is, that lineup has not scored particularly well. Florida has not scored particularly well as a team. So like, how is how is a team like that supposed to jump out? What does Florida do well? They absolutely bludgeon you on the glass, and they defend at a quite high level. So that kind of makes sense that wouldn't really, that doesn't wear you down in 4 minutes, doesn't wear you down at the under 12. But by the second half, that happens. And once the other team starts to make mental mistakes, that's when Florida gets out and runs, scores in transition. And that's kind of exactly like that mega run you saw Florida go on to start the second half. So I just like the George Washington game honestly went probably about as exactly as you could imagine it, or someone should have predicted it did. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was pretty close to even the KenPom prediction. Florida didn't quite cover, I don't think, but the KenPom number. But whatever the case may be, it's just like, yeah, like that is what Florida it has done and will continue to do, I think, unless they can figure out their offense. Like if you're going to play a rock fight style, like this is that's what happens. The games are closer in the first half, and then if you are to win, it's because you wear the other team down. And for George Washington, who is really good, I mean, George Washington is another look at how revenue sharing is changing college basketball. One of the leagues that is heavily benefited by this is the Atlantic 10, where they don't have football. So it's not like there's high major money going into the A10, but George Washington is not competing with football for dollars. So George Washington has good NIL. That's how they were able to retain a number of their guys, and a number of guys that could be playing at the high major level. And, George Washington is 81st because they took just a brutal loss to Delaware, unfortunately. But before that, they were looking like they're up to 60 in KenPom. And I think that there probably are between a 60 and 85th kind of team in KenPom. Maybe actually could be even a little higher, I think. But that is, that's why George Washington is really good. But yeah, I don't know. Like that's my, like, both. It wasn't out of character of the Gators. That's why I don't think it was concerning on that end. But because it was in character, that's why it is somewhat concerning, because you might run into a team that makes a lead, like that actually is able to pull away a little bit more. And then because of Florida's struggles offensively, they're not really currently built to come from behind. I mean, you saw the spurt ability against George Washington. So maybe someone would say like, okay, they could come back in a game that way. And that's certainly possible. But coming back when you're not a team that creates or makes shots at a high level, that's a little bit more difficult. So that would be kind of my thought. But really, yeah, the script and how everything shook out, I don't actually think it was that unbelievable, other than the fact that Florida was still like a little bit worse offensively than I thought they would be, despite the fact I don't think they're great offensively. They also defended even better than I thought, even though I thought that the Gators defended really well. And that's something that, like, George Washington really is a good offensive team, and Florida was able to defend them at a really high level. So there is some positives there. Maybe a little bit, maybe some negatives in there, but also some positives too.
Yeah. I mean, I think that win will be fine. I mean, GW's picked third in the A10. There were people before the year, Will Warren, who thought this would be the year the A10 returned to a 3-bid league. So, anyway, it's been a better, and it's been actually in the non-conference. I think they're 7th in KenPom, which is the highest they've been in a while. So it's a better league this year than it has been. Maybe due to some of the stuff that Eric's talking about too, like just NIL opportunities.
I would say exclusively.
Yeah,
would be the reason why. And I think there's probably 5 or 6 teams that have more money than 20 or 30 high major teams. Like, actually, I do think that I actually like. Well, as I look at Loyola, who just lost to Chicago State and has been a disaster despite that. Like Loyola has more money than some teams in the SEC. So which just shows the disaster there. But I would say, like they should be competing for 3. I don't think they will because of some of these performances. But pretty much NIL based exclusively.
That's so interesting, and like that's great. I think that's great for college basketball. Like I've always enjoyed those years where the A10 had 4 or 5 bids. I mean, I thought it was fun. So hopefully that happens again. We will preview not St. Francis, which is a tiny little school in Loretto, Pennsylvania, most famously known as the alma mater of Charles Schwab for you finance people, or Brennan Manning, a famous evangelist for you Jesus people. Whichever way you want to go.
Man, yes.
Yeah, the duality of man, indeed. They went to the NCAA tournament last year and then promptly announced that they were moving to Division III after this season. And so their longtime head coach resigned, and that's all you really need to know about St. Francis, other than they're near the bottom of the KenPom ratings. So Florida could win this game by 40 and probably will drop a spot or two in KenPom. If they don't, they certainly will. But more interesting to me is the game that follows it. And our game previews always on the podcast are brought to you by Game Time Sidekicks. You can order from them until December 16th. So you have 2 more days. This podcast will drop. You'll probably have less time than that. By midnight on December 16th. They don't guarantee anything before Christmas, but they have a ton of programs that they have gear for, of course, including Florida. Lots of national championship gear, lots of Florida Yetis and tumblers. It's really good material. There is a free skinny can koozie that comes with a purchase of $60 or more, free holiday shipping with $50 or more. And if you spend anything, you get 15% off right now through the holidays. So definitely check out Game Time Sidekicks. We're happy to have them preview things. And they are going to sponsor our preview of Colgate, who was picked to finish second in the Patriot League, a league they've won 4 of the last 5 years. Florida's assistant coach, Dave Klatsky, was on staff for a couple of those titles, or at least one of those titles. Last year was weird. They went 10-8 in the Patriot League, which was a first for Matt Langle in a while. They didn't host the Patriot League conference tournament game. Patriot League protects its best teams in the regular season by letting them host games. That was also a little weird. And they have played quite well, honestly, out of the gate. The American was picked to win the Patriot League. Right now, it looks like Colgate is the class of that conference by some distance. They were within 3 of what I think is a fantastic Michigan State team at the under 4 media timeout. That was eye-opening, and then just played a knockdown drag-out with St. Bonaventure, a team with a ton of NIL. Speaking of the A-10, last week lost by 8. Eric, kind of your thoughts on the Raiders' really, really fun offense.
Yeah, it's definitely not the Colgate of a couple of years ago. I will say that there was the run of years where they like really dominated that league. They finished like 90th in KenPom one year, but kind of like for a very big stretch, they were like 120th in KenPom, like way like lapping the field in the Patriot League, where most teams are lower in the 200s. And like they were literally like, there was times where like the team that was in second would be like double their KenPom rank. That is not the case with Colgate anymore. Just one of the like, I think people talk like so much about the like the real top of the sport when it comes to like the way that NIL has affected it, where it's like, oh, the guy that even talking NIL like could be making like $50,000 in the MAC and gets offered 500,000. Well, it's like, oh, of course that guy's going to leave. But like where it is like really affected is at like the 0 NIL level, like the Patriot League, versus getting 20 to 50,000 at kind of the next level. And it has just been really hard for teams like Colgate to retain guys. It also, when you're dealing with some of these higher academic institutions, you can't really play the transfer portal in the same way. Not that they can't take transfer players, but it's not just like at a lot of other places where you could just get anyone in the portal that would fit basketball. Like they do have some challenges bringing guys in. So it is definitely still impressive that they have remained at the top of the league. And like you said, the class of the league, they were literally twice as good as anyone in their league for like 6 years. And now they are definitely better than everyone in their league. But I don't think this is, I don't think it's going to be quite the kind of matchup it was, or sorry, it would have been if the Gators played this team. That would be like 115th best team in the country, like a couple of years back. Now, Matt Langle, which is another kind of interesting story. He's someone that for years, everyone's like, oh, Matt Langle, like one of the best low major coaches. Like this is like one of the best offensive minds, man. This guy needs to get out. He's been at Colgate since 2012, never really got like the big job opportunity. So he's never left. And now it's probably only going to become a little bit more difficult. He has enough of respect in the field. It'll be kind of interesting to see. These are also the kind of guys that have been leaving for high major associate positions. I would like hell if the position opens on Florida staff, I would hope that Todd Golden considers getting Matt Langle out of there. But it is definitely a lower caliber of player on this team. And but I would say that, the style is still really good. What they're known for, some of the Princeton stuff, really good cutting team. Someone who like plays through their front court players really as much as their guards. Like they don't really play with the like true point guard type setting. Though they've had some really good point guards that have went up and played at a really high level in other leagues. But a team that is going to move the ball and make you work. And it'd be kind of interesting to see like if they play the way that they normally do and Florida plays the same way like they probably do. It's like, hey, Kyle Carlissimo, 6'2", 190 pounds. Like, hey, that's who Thomas Houck is guarding. So that's going to be kind of there's going to be some interesting situations there. And to be honest, if I'm Florida, like, and I don't want to sound like I'm approaching this game without the proper level of respect, but like, yeah, could Florida just like switch everything, keep everything in front, dominate the glass and win by a whole bunch? Like, yeah, absolutely. But I would be interested if Florida kind of used this as an opportunity to get better for kind of situations like when you're playing the UConn caliber teams where you have to guard actions at a high level and just say like, hey, Houck, I know in a lot of situations we're going to have you like maybe switching some of these actions with like, smaller guy, whatever, but like, hey, for this game, like, you're fighting through everything. Like you've got to chase around screens. You've got to be there on backdoor cuts. Like it'd be kind of interesting to see, but I do think that, I kind of wish this was the Colgate of old, but every time I see them, I mean, I guess like you said, Neil, they just played Bonaventure really tight and played Michigan State tight. So maybe I'm not quite giving them enough credit, but I will say I feel like Langel is getting absolutely everything out of that roster.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I like that they were, and I think I said they were picked to finish second behind American. That's incorrect. Sorry. And Navy was actually picked to win that league, and American was picked to finish third. So Navy was picked second. Jalen Cox was their lone all league player. He is a 6'3" guard. He is not really ball dominant. He's kind of more of a traditional point guard. His assist rate is preposterous, 32% right now. That's very good. And then they have two last names that if you're interested in this kind of stuff, it might be fascinating to you. One is their best shooter, a guy named Kyle Carlissimo. He is shooting 45% from deep. His dad is PJ Carlissimo, who once coached Seton Hall to the national title game, but is most famous for choking out Latrell Sprewell. YouTube it. That's probably his most famous moment. I think he's an NBA exec now. And then they have a 6'4" guard named Ben Tweedy, whose dad is a professional coach at a very high level in Australia, ran the Australian Center for Excellence for a few years, but is actually an American, and his brother is a guy named Jeff Tweedy, who's one of the most famous singer-songwriters in the world. So some fun with last names and sons and nephews at Colgate.
Yeah, where else are you getting that type of analysis right there? That's I saw Carlissimo and I was like, oh, I wonder, but I didn't actually look it up to know. So that is really cool.
All right, guys, that's our preview of Colgate. Florida does play St. Francis first. The Colgate game is Sunday. St. Francis is Wednesday night, 6:30. So a couple of bye games here. Big for finding an eighth man. Patreon.com/FloridaVB Hour if you want to do listener questions and get into that. Again, that's going to drop before you even listen to this. Go Gators. Keep tagging closeouts.